All right, everyone tuning in for another episode of the Claytalkshow. This will be episode 3. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about recruiting, the practices of recruiting. We have Alex here who's been in the recruiting space with some extensive experience to share his experiences with recruiting, pros and cons that you may run into. So, this is for people who are making that transition into the IT field or any other field for that matter. When you start to apply for jobs, you're most likely have to deal with a recruiter. So, what we're going to cover today is just basically what things you can expect with talking to recruiters, some issues going on in the job market these days for people who are job seeking and just how to navigate the job market when dealing with recruiters in the hiring process. So, without further ado, we're just going to start off with just the introduction question of just getting a little background information from you, Alex. Like, what do you do currently? What your background is in, and just we'll just go from there. So you can just start off with that.
Absolutely. My name is Alex Carell. Um, I am a US based recruiter. I have been in the recruitment sector since 1996 in one fashion or another. Right now, I am a freelance recruiter specializing in technology recruitment, mainly fintech and a variety of other technology arenas. I do dabble in other areas, but primarily in technology for US based candidates and companies. So I've seen a lot of the changes in the recruitment sector, both on the candidate side and the employer side for the last many, many years, more years than I care to remember. Long, long before you could apply for jobs online.
Okay, okay. Interesting facts that you just given out there. Information for recruiting. So I find it interesting that you do fintech. So we're around in the same area since my background is technology and information security. So I guess you're just going to start off with okay, people who wants to make the transition, they want to know what is a recruiter's job. What is the goal for companies hiring a recruiter? So let's just get a basic overview of what their purpose in the company is, right? So
Right. When applying for a job, it's important for candidates to, I always say, know your audience. So, what you do in terms of applying for work is going to be very different for dealing with an in house hiring manager, which most people consider a recruiter, or whether you're dealing with an outside recruiter. So, depending on which avenue you take for applying for that job, that's going to determine how best you're going to do that. So, whether you deal with the recruiter in house or a recruiter externally, that's going to change the dynamics, or whether you're just applying directly, which is not something I recommend in this marketplace. You know, a lot of people are so used to the process as it was 5 and 10 years ago, but I can tell you firsthand, this market is nothing like people have ever seen before. So we're just coming out of a pandemic, and that's changed the entire landscape in ways that people are only starting to understand. A lot of the models that apply to the job market simply don't work anymore. A lot of companies are seeing that. I mean, Indeed just had a huge layoff. LinkedIn is making massive changes. Career Builder is making massive changes. And all these companies are trying to adapt, but people often forget it's candidates on the other side of that that are having to share the brunt of that adaptation to this marketplace.
okay, yeah, it's interesting. You listed those different platforms for people to go on to apply and the way things are changing these days, right? So if you all follow Alex, he shares a lot of great information on his LinkedIn about the recruiting space these days. So I would highly recommend just to give it some insight there. But on the other hand, since things are changing a lot and the job market is crazy, with people who are in it, they see that there are thousands of layoffs almost every week from different companies, right? So, and it's almost in a sense to where someone who's trying to get a job they're feeling as though they're stuck. If they're with a company they don't want to be with anymore, or people who are just out of work completely right now and unemployed for months at a time, and they're just trying to land a role. Okay, so with that being said, when applying for jobs, how does the process look from resume, getting into the database of the site that they're applying to the recruiter picking it up, to the interview process? How does that look on the recruiter's perspective? Because talking to some recruiters, um, there's this whole thing of having your resume tailored, which makes sense. But the job postings these days, as far as job descriptions, are a lot of copy and paste, right? A lot of people see it that if you look up a certain job rec, you'll see maybe the same type of requirements for a different role. There's a lot of copy and paste. So people are trying to tailor their resumes and they're getting back nothing but rejections. Can you give us some insight as to why is that happening? Because a recruiter would say they look at every resume that they get for a rec that may have 2,500 applications. So people want to know, what is the purpose of the resume tailoring, the getting past the ATS, if that's not true. They're saying there's an ATS myth that it doesn't exist to where it filters out candidates automatically, but some people take that with a grain of salt. So
Well,
since you're in it, tell us.
you mentioned a lot of areas right there, so I'll try to answer as many of those questions as I can.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with ATS? Because that's a solution that people are fairly well aware of, or at least the problem is they think they're aware of it. See, most people think there's an ATS standard. First off, ATS is an acronym. It stands for Application Tracking System or Software, depending who you ask. So that's a general blanket statement in terms of some type of system, usually a third party, that employers and or recruiters may use for managing the influx of resumes they received. Now that's a pretty broad statement. The challenge is that most candidates assume that there's one standard. There isn't. They also assume that there is a standard that applies to, say, Indeed, or a standard that applies to LinkedIn, or a standard that applies to Career Builder, or any of these other platforms. That's also not true. Indeed is not sitting there programming their systems to be able to filter and screen out your resume. They use third parties in what they call resume parsers to actually parse out these resumes and be able to screen those documents, whether they're PDF, Word, or any other type of format. So there is no such thing as a standardized ATS resume format, as much as people try to sell you on that concept. There is no standardized ATS platform. There's no standardized ATS software. So I guess going to the core of your question in terms of candidates, how do they even navigate that? Well, first off, there has been so many challenges in the job application process in the last couple of years that I recommend candidates here, now in 2023, do not bother with the application websites like Indeed, like Career Builder. Now, these were once incredible sites, places you can go apply for jobs, but now they've become a hotbed of scams, frauds, ghost jobs. These things are just starting to become aware to people. So the numbers that I see are all over the map, but the ones that I typically stick towards is that about 60% of the jobs on these job application websites are not real jobs. They're fake jobs, they're ghost jobs, they're promotions for MLM programs and a number of other things. But more importantly, 80% of jobs that even exist aren't ever going to be on these websites. Most employers do not spend the time and effort putting them out there because they don't have to. So again, here in 2023, I usually recommend people focus on networking. They focus on going to the company websites directly. The challenge is that the reason you're seeing these job applications getting 500, 1,000, 2,000 applicants, and you can see that happening, is because people are taking what we call a spray and pray approach. It actually got so bad that LinkedIn just changed it. It was something I talked about. You could see it the numbers go up and up, and I would see these numbers. In 15 minutes, companies would get 500, 1,000 resumes, and LinkedIn saw their numbers going down. So what they did now is that anything and above 200 applicants, you won't even see. So if ever you see on LinkedIn now 200 plus applicants, you don't know if it's 2,000 applicants, you don't know how many applicants are there, but you know it's a lot. So now you have hundreds or thousands of people competing for a single job that you don't even know if it's real. So what I recommend to candidates is don't worry about how your resume looks. And this is very important. If you're dealing with recruiters directly, say myself or outside recruiters, I can tell you, an experienced recruiter will tell you, those are some of the worst resumes you can imagine. Why? Because they target people that are currently employed, people that have a long work history. And there's reasons for all this. Somebody's been at a company 10 years and's had 2 jobs over the 30 years they've been working, probably doesn't spend too much time worrying about how to write a resume. That is why most recruiters are just so used to the fact that they have bad resumes, and that's just part of it. So I wouldn't worry about it if you're going after recruiters, if that's your avenue, but I usually recommend people go directly for the companies. Identify companies you want to work for, areas that you want to work with, the type of company that you would feel comfortable with. Now, what a lot of people will say is contact the hiring manager at the company directly. I tell people, don't waste your time. They're getting inundated with dozens and hundreds of requests every day from people thinking that's the right approach. No. I explain, go on LinkedIn or any other social platform, identify the departments and the people that you want to work with. So if it's in technology, talk to the people in the tech department. If it's in finance, talk to those people. Befriend those and ask for referrals. A lot of people are scared to ask for referrals because they're thinking, why would a stranger refer me? What most people don't realize is a lot of companies, big and small, have internal referral programs that will incentivize employees $100, $500, $10,000 for a referral. So if they like you on LinkedIn, if they like your profile, and a lot of times they don't even look at your profile. They'll give you a referral. I can tell you I see it every day. So for now, avoid the job application websites. And they're changing, they're fixing, they know all this stuff. Avoid going to the recruiters in-house because they're getting inundated. Go to the departments that you want to work with, befriend these people, connect with these people, reach out, because they're not used to getting hundreds of requests a day. If you're in the tech department, you're used to dealing with cybersecurity, you're not used to asking for a referral, but hey, your company offers you $1,000 to make a referral, 1 or 2 people reach out to you a week, you're going to make some extra money. And that's what I recommend. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's a lot of great information there. So it can stop people from wasting their times with the 500-600 applications. And this is becoming a thing on LinkedIn too. I see a lot of these posts of people saying I've applied to 600 plus jobs, and it's almost like that's copy and paste too. So I really don't even know if it's real anymore myself. I've seen so many people saying that. So, and it's almost word for word. I literally will copy their paragraph of their mentally draining post and then search it on LinkedIn, and I see 20 other people have the exact same thing word for word. So it's kind of hard to see if anything's real these days. But that's just one side of the story. Like for me, myself, with the roles I've had, I've never really went through a recruiter, but recruiters contact me all the time, and it's fancy that you say that they contact people who are already in a role rather than someone who's looking for a role.
That often
It's almost kind of backwards.
Well, that often confuses people, but let me explain to you why that is. It's very simple, and recruiters don't like telling people about this, but as you've probably seen from my LinkedIn page, I just want to throw it out there. Look, I've been in this industry 25 years, and I'm tired of seeing this happen to candidates, especially now. So recruiters will not target you if you're out of a job, if you're looking for a job, if you want to find a new job. They just won't. Why? Because recruiters typically are what they call pay for placement. They will charge the company between 20, 35, even 40% of your annual salary. Now, if you're somebody that's looking to leave a company, the mindset usually is, why is that employer going to spend 10, 20, $30,000 in a placement fee for somebody that doesn't have a job, which means that they probably aren't wanted by all the other application websites that they apply to? And I know it sounds horrible and backwards thinking, but that's just the mindset that they're dealing with. So they want to take you, and it's kind of paradoxical in the fact that they want to take you, already employed, take you away from your current employer and put you somewhere else, but demand absolute loyalty. But that's just the dynamic of how recruiters work. So you will notice that you probably get contacted from recruiters all the time. I have no doubt in that. But it's because you have a job. If you didn't, I can almost assure you, and I hear that from candidates all the time, where they're confused, they don't understand. When they were working, they got hit up by recruiters all the time. Now that they're not, they don't. That's just a fact of life, and that's why I tell people, if recruiters aren't reaching out to you, just don't bother with them. They're not going to be interested in you. Now, there are exceptions. You always hear about the cousins, brothers, friends, and those are exceptions. And what I tell people is when you're unemployed or you're looking for a new job, your most valuable resource is time. You don't have time to spend wasting it on things that have a 1% chance of working out, and that's going to be working with recruiters in most cases.
Yes, it's almost kind of sad because the way people are on the market, and they get the mindset of the recruiter is the person who gets me through the door. And a lot of people ask me for like advice of, they're trying to make this transition into tech. How do they get their resume seen? Because a lot of times they believe their resumes are not even getting seen when they apply for these roles, and it's hard to say. But I give I give resources like different websites that can uh, scan your resume based on how an applicant tracking system works. And even in my company, like you said, when you want to refer someone internally, we even have a software where if someone on an external side sends me their resume, I can upload it to our talent portal, and that tool would generate a percentage of their resume that matches against current roles that are open within the company. So it's kind of hard to tell people how to navigate these days, because when layoffs come around and their main goal is to get right back to working, but people being out of work for so long, and the issue is you have the resume gurus, right? As you said already, that don't even worry about your appearance of your resume, because you have so many resume gurus. You'll hear a different answer each person you go to. So I tell a lot of people, don't waste their time paying for these $500-600 resumes, and some people have, and they still don't have a job. Uh, the second part of that is recruiters targeting people who are working only is kind of counterintuitive, because the whole purpose is to get the people who are looking for roles into a role, so those jobs can get filled easier. I would think it'd be harder for a recruiter to take a person from a company that's already established in that company and bring them over to another company they may not have any idea about. I would think that'd be harder to do, right? Because you have to convince them to, go to a new company if they've been there for 10 years or so, unless they're looking for a way out, right? Um, and then another thing is fake recruiters. There's a lot of, like you said, scams going on. They hit you up in your DMs and saying if you're interested in for a job, and some people have fallen victim to this, unfortunately, with the clicking the links and paying the fee or whatever on WhatsApp and texting applications, and just okay. So how our job seekers are going to avoid, first of all, wasting time with fake recruiters? How do they spot those things out? And two, for the ones who for and for the recruiters who are targeting only people who are in work, what advice or what type of words do you have for those type of recruiters who are only targeting people who are currently working? Is that an effective method or not? So
Well, two parts, I would say. Um, One of the themes you probably have seen on a lot of the posts that I generate is never pay anything. You've got career coaches, you've got resume reviews, resume edits, you've got resume distributions, you've got resume templates, and I say don't. The only surefire way to ensure that you're not scammed or even not receiving value of what you pay for is just not to pay anything. There's so many great templates online. There's so many great free resources online. There's so many wonderful people that are willing to help and give feedback. Just don't ever spend money. There's just almost no situation where you should be spending money. And if somebody asks you to buy their report, to buy their coaching, to buy their teachings, well, anytime you're asking to depart with your money, just don't do it. I can't tell you how many people have told me they've spent $500, $1,000, $2,000 on their resume edits, and I or someone else has given them far more help and insight than that could possibly do it. So the one general rule of thumb I give to people is, look, you're probably out of work or wanting to find new work. You don't have the money to be spending on making somebody else money. It just comes down.
Exactly.
So just anytime you're presented with an opportunity to spend money on your job search, just don't. Just plain and simple. Don't spend time researching the legitimacy of it. They may be a legitimate provider, but it's just not worth the effort. So in terms of what candidates can do, a lot of my background is in technology, and as you know from technology, it's all about numbers, and I'm a numbers guy. So the way I look at it, if you're going to work with a recruiter, and I'm sorry to say this, but you've got maybe a 0.1 to a 1% chance of landing a job. That's just how it is. They go through so many resumes and so many candidates. If you go to a job application website, you may have a 1 to 2% chance of getting a job if you're lucky. If you go to the company's headhunter and their internal resources, maybe that jumps to 3 or 5%. Whereas if you go to the departments you want to be working with, now suddenly that starts to get into 5 to 10%. These may seem small, but think about it. If you're applying to as many of those posts that you saw, say 500, 1,000 companies, wouldn't you rather have a 5 to 10% chance of getting that job than the 1% chances if you're wasting your time? I mean, it all comes down to numbers. You only have so much time in the day, so use that wisely. You only have so much money and resources spent, so don't spend it. And you know what's working in this market now, so just go after that. Can you get lucky with recruiters? Yes, I see it every day. I live it. Can you get lucky with hiring managers directly? Yes, it happens. But is it likely? No. So just go with what works in this market. It's going to be different 5 years from now. It was different 5 years ago. But in 2023, that approach I've seen works again and again. Does it work every time? No. There's no solution that works for everybody. But again, it all comes down to the numbers and what works most of the time.
Yes, yes, that is a gem. So people watching, please take notes of these things and just stop wasting so much of your life and energy on spending money on promised services that they can't deliver on. And a lot of my last video covered the promise of going to these boot camps and colleges and getting promised a job once you finish with. That's clearly not the case. You want to do these things if you want to. If you're in a position to where you want to spend your money on these type of services, then go ahead. But do not go in it for the ideal of a guaranteed outcome. It's like a gamble with anything else. But I do want some insight as to the training for recruiters, right? So as I said, I get contacted by a lot of recruiters. Some are real, some are fake, but the real ones I talk to for the different companies. And the first thing they usually start off with is, I'm going in blind here. They don't really know all the details of the job. They just know what the employer said that they're looking for, right? So, as far as the training aspect of it, if you're dealing with technology, I'm going to put this in the simplest way I can. You have Google Chrome and you have Microsoft Edge. Say a recruiter say they want someone with experience with Microsoft Edge, and they're contacting the person who looks like they may have experience. But the person tells them, "Oh, I use Google Chrome instead of Edge." "Oh, you're not going to be a great fit for this role." It makes no sense to me. Can you tell me why does that happen? Why does that happen? Why? I mean, they say they're not technical. I understand that part, but at the same time, you should know what technologies and what skills are similar in nature, to a certain extent, right? So why does that happen?
Well, keep in mind there are millions of recruiters throughout the country. It is a huge, huge marketplace. They place a lot of jobs in a lot of different areas, and the more successful recruiters are going to be specialized in one field or another. But in terms of why it's happening, you may or may not have noticed this because it may not have registered, but a lot of this has changed fundamentally in the last couple of years since the pandemic. Why has it changed? Well, recruitment is very much like real estate. In real estate, you have a situation where it's usually either a buyer's market or a seller's market. There's certainly transition points, but by and large, most markets either fall into those two categories. And recruitment is no different. It's either an employer market or it's a candidate market. Now, during the pandemic, it was very much a candidate market. No one wanted to work. And that was very much true. I know that's a euphemism you hear all the time, but you can imagine you had state funded unemployment. You had federal funded unemployment. So suddenly you had people that averaged $500 to $1,000 a week in salary now getting $1,000, $1,200 a week just to stay home. I mean, I don't blame a lot of these people for not wanting to work. It makes sense. The government overfunded unemployment. So what happened then? You had very much a candidate marketplace where it was very difficult to get candidates. What happened then to the recruitment marketplace? Well, they needed recruiters. Millions of new people jumped into the recruiter space simply because it was a hot commodity. Everyone thought, oh, you're just giving away jobs? I can do that. And so many people with no prior experience, no education, no formal training, and I challenge anybody to test this. I look at it all the time, and it's something that just irks me to no end. If you look at all these recruiters on LinkedIn and you see them all over the place, look at their profiles for a minute. You would be surprised. I think the last 100 recruiters I looked at, I would say over half of them had less than 1 year experience in recruitment. And that's what had happened to the industry because suddenly you have this influx of employers that needed to hire and they could no longer do it themselves. They needed to hire different people with the connections and knowing people that wanted jobs, so they just hired anybody and everybody as recruiters. That's why you saw different companies that just loaded up on, and it wasn't only small companies, large companies. It's only now coming out that companies like Meta and Google just loaded up on the recruitment staff. A lot of these people you could see on social media will admit full-heartedly that they didn't even do anything. For the last year or two, they just sat and they didn't even bother with recruitment because they simply just had to come in and clock a time clock simply because there were just too many recruiters that they hired because employers were so desperate to hire people. How do you hire people for your company? You hire a headhunter, you hire a recruiter, you hire a hiring manager. That's why you have this influx. So, to answer your question, why you're dealing with so many inexperienced recruiters, whether it be inexperienced in the field they're in or inexperienced in terms of recruitment itself, is because you had this huge influx of recruiters and now you're only starting to see that shift. If you look at a lot of the people that are unemployed today, a lot of them actually are recruiters because these companies
Fact.
front loaded a lot of these recruiters who really weren't recruiters. They were just out of a job and they thought, hey, this is something I could do. I can make a lot of money. I'm going to do it. And that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, and I definitely see that a lot. It's 90% of people on my timeline are former talent acquisition people looking for roles, and it's been months for them, and some around in the tech area. But it is it is amazing to see these things going on these days, and it's kind of frustrating for job seekers of the navigation of how to move around in the market and all the different games and the windows that you gotta go through just to even get in front of a hiring manager for an interview. But speaking of bringing on new talent, right? So when you are having an initial recruiting screen, let's talk about why is the salary a hidden figure? right? It's not on the job postings, and then the recruiters don't want to give you a range when you ask for a salary range. They want to see if you want to shortchange yourself because the goal for the company is to bring in the most qualified person at the cheapest dollar amount possible, right? So it's kind of laughable, right? If you have a job description that wants ABC unicorn requirements, and then it's hardly ever going to be met with all requirements. But you get someone who's very close, and you offer them entry level pay. Let's talk about why is that a thing? Why does that goes on? Why does the salary why does the salary disclosure is a game, and why do they want to bring on professionals at laughable price ranges?
Well, there's two questions there. Um, it's funny, or I say funny, but sad. There's no recruiter that you will ever speak to that doesn't know three things about the salary. Three things that are constant across the board with every single recruiter is a floor salary. That's the minimum that the company will pay for that position. So let's say, for argument's sake, $60,000. They'll offer a target salary. That's the average of what they're expecting, typically within line with the market. Let's say $70,000. And then they'll offer a ceiling. That's the most they're willing to pay. Let's say about $80,000. Now, any recruiter going in is going to know those three numbers. So that begs the question, why don't they tell people that? Well, they told everybody that. Everybody's going to start with $80,000. And then you're not going to be able to go backwards on that. So they frown upon asking for that, even though there are laws now that actually require that. But recruiters simply don't want to cut their own throat. They don't want to be in a situation where they're not able to negotiate. They'd rather hide the fact that, look, I've got a range of $60,000 to $80,000. You're asking for 90, but I'm going to wow you over with their benefits, their this, their that, and get you down to 80 to get you in the door. You know, I know that you're unhappy with your current job. I know that your wife wants you to move. I know that your husband wants you out of there. I know all these different things about you by wasting your time for the last couple of weeks getting to know you. You'll notice when you're dealing with recruiters, and you may have seen this yourself, a lot of the questions they ask aren't even about your job history. It's like, what are you doing? Like, how's your family life? What did you do this weekend? There's so many personal things, and you think to yourself, well, they're just trying to be nice. They're trying to be friendly. Not necessarily. They're trying to see, where are your pain points? What are your interest levels? Why are you wanting to leave this stable job? And how can I get that salary low around either that midpoint or that lower point? You would be surprised how many candidates cut their throats in that process because they think to themselves, I really don't like my job, and maybe that is worth taking a $10,000 pay cut. So often candidates will take pay cuts in a job they don't like for the potential of a job they may actually like. And so recruiters have so many different benefits for not disclosing that salary. One of which is that they can get more candidates either at that middle tier or that lower tier. People would often assume, well, that means a few dollars less in commissions. True, but they don't want one candidate placement with that company. They want 10. So you can imagine that if they go in with a company that's willing to pay up to $80,000 and they get you at $60,000, now they're an attractive recruiter to that company. So now they're not placing one job, they're placing 5 jobs and 10 jobs. So recruiters a lot of times will think long term. So a lot of people are confused by that because they'll think, well, if the recruiter's being paid a percentage of my salary and you're lowballing me, where's the benefit in that? Well, the benefit is I get you in cheap. You get a new job, so you feel like you've accomplished something. The company saves a few dollars, but I get the business long term as a recruiter that can get people in the door cheap. I know it all seems very manipulative, and it is, but until there passes a federal law, which I think there should, that requires that there be a realistic range, because I've seen ranges go from $1 to $1,000,000, and it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, no. But until they actually have pay transparency, I talk to people about it all the time. I think pay transparency should come in the form of actual numbers. It's very rare that companies will hire positions that they've never hired before. Just maybe in a startup, it It happens, but
Yeah.
it's going to be rare that you don't know a general range, either from people you have hired, people you have on staff, or just numbers that you know within the industry. So you know the general range of what you're looking for. Otherwise, the whole system wouldn't work. So requiring that they display the actual range, and even more so, like I said, no recruiter ever accepts a job placement requirement without having those three numbers. So requiring those range, and it's so short-sighted in that, the mindset is that I'm going to turn away candidates that are just slightly higher, or I'm going to lose out on money because now I'm going to overpay people. And it's just, there's so many nuances to it, but I know it's frustrating to candidates, but the best I tell candidates is stay firm. Look, you know what you're worth. You know what the marketplace says. These are numbers that you know. It's very easy to research. There's almost no job out there that you can't take the marketplace, you can't take the area, you can't take the skill sets and give an actual range that you're worth. You know what you can live by in terms of what salary you need to survive. Don't undercut that. And a lot of people think, I need a job, and I know the mindset. You're out of work 3 months, 6 months, a year. You just need to pay rent. You need to buy food. That makes sense. But you're not going to be served anymore by a situation where you take a 20 to 30% pay cut and you give up on the opportunity that maybe that job is a month away. Maybe it's 2 months away. I know it's painful to be in that situation, but undercutting your value is never going to be worth it. And taking less money right now that's so significant that you're not going to be able to survive anyway doesn't make sense. And in the world of pay scales, it's very hard to go, backwards. So if you're making 100 grand, if you know the job is worth 100 grand, don't go to 60 out of desperation, because you're going to find that getting back to that 100,000 is going to be a lot more challenging. So you have to imagine it may take you years to get back to there. So imagine how much you're losing over those years by undercutting yourself out of desperation. Again, I know it's hard for a lot of people, but you just can't shoot yourself in the foot for that. If you follow the procedures that work and the numbers that work and make the efforts and stop wasting your time, and stick to what you know you're worth, it does work out in most cases. Every case, no. But in most people's situations, it does work. The market will level itself out. We're in a market correction right now, and that's what people have to understand.
Yeah, I do agree with that, of not shortchanging yourself, but it's kind of hard days, as you said, with people who have families and things to take care of, and they just need something to pay their bills. But that goes into the oversaturated market. There's entry level people, there's talented people, there's a broad range of people on the market. So, example with somebody I was talking to is they're trying to transition uh, from IT, or they're trying to transition from HR into IT, and they're already making at a set salary range that they want to be at, but they want to potentially stay at that range or make more. So if they're making $50,000 now and they want to do a career change, the logical thing is getting a job that's a lateral move that's going to pay me the same or a little bit more. But talking to a recruiter, they applied for the role. The recruiter said they liked their experience. They had their interview, and then they got to the salary negotiations. She told them, I want. She said about 5,000 more than what she was making currently. She said 55,000. Oh, okay. Then 2 days go by. Um, they reached out again and said, "Oh, well, the max we can pay is 40,000." Well, even though they want to move into the role, it's like, why would I take 10,000 or 15,000 less than what I'm making? So they said, if there's no way we can go up, they're trying to do some more negotiations. No way we can at least go up to 50, where they was currently already at. They go back again and they said, well, we found another candidate who accepted the pay that we were offering. So that causes a problem, right? Because that's like a slippery slope. When it's so many people on the market and they know this, it's like your salary negotiations are cut almost, because they know there's somebody that's out there that's going to take that lower dollar amount, even though they like your skills, but there's someone with similar skills and they're looking for a role immediately. they're going to take that lower range. So how do you suggest moving around in that type of environment like it is right now? So it's just going to be somebody who's going to take the minimum range, and that makes it hard for negotiations with salary.
Well, absolutely. Different companies are going to have, different benchmarks in terms of who they accept. So, in terms of how people can combat some of that stuff, at least, I mean, if you're insistent on working with recruiters, which again in this market I don't recommend, but when in terms of working with recruiters, it's important to understand what works with most recruiters. So, what I usually advise to people when they're working with recruiters, it's almost certain that you're not the first candidate they've spoken to about that job. I mean, think about it. They're probably trying to place that job for 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe even longer. And you can ask them that. How long has this job been open? Whether you get a straight answer or not, I don't know. But the more important question is, why haven't you, the recruiter, placed this job yet? Now, a lot of times you will get a straightforward answer. And if they say something to the effect of, well, we haven't found a candidate within the price range that we're looking for, that in itself is a huge red flag. If a recruiter's been recruiting for a position for anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks and pay scale is exactly what's been their stumbling block, I would tell candidates just avoid it. I know desperate times, desperate measures, but if this is a company that's willing to undercut individuals like that, it's a red flag. What people often have to realize is that it's not only a situation of you being interviewed, is you're interviewing them for the position as well. And if you're starting to see these red flags this early on, it's kind of like dating. When you're dating people, the first date is usually about as good as you're going to get. And everything kind of goes downhill from that. Again, there are exceptions. But if this is what you see now, that they're willing to undercut your pay, undercut your value, undercut what you can bring to the table, then it's just not worth it. And I mean that full-heartedly, simply because, it's just the beginning. If the company knows without question that, this is a $50,000 minimum job, but they're only willing to pay $40,000, it's not going to end there. You're not only going to be earning that $40,000 and then some, you're probably going to be doing the work of 2 and 3 people. And in the long run, it's just not worth your sanity. Again, easier said than done. I know people are struggling, but you could put a lot of those frustrations in by just calling it quits with that recruiter. A lot of times people assume when you're working with either recruiters or hiring managers that you have to go into the point of they either ghost you or they tell you no. That's not true. If you're seeing red flags out of the gate, you can just say the same thing a lot of them may say to you. It's like, I appreciate your time. I'm not interested. I wish you luck in your recruitment efforts. And I tell that to candidates all the time who come to me and say, I was working with this recruiter. I got a bad feeling on interview 1. Interview 2 is worse. Interview 3 was even worse. I'm like, why did you stay with that? Think about all that
Yeah,
time you spent with them. You could have been looking for jobs where they would have actually appreciated you. So don't assume just because you're going through the motions, which unfortunately there are a lot more today than there used to be, that you have to continue that. If you get a bad feeling about the process, then I can assure you it's only going to get worse. And it's just not worth the effort at that point. That effort could be better spent on something that will be the right fit. Most people in time do find an organization that suits them. We get older, we get more experience, we become familiar with the process, and markets change. I can assure you, in time, most candidates will find the right job, but with that, it's important not to settle. I mean, again, going back to relationships, that's why there's so many divorces in this country. People get married early. They get married for the wrong reasons. They take the first opportunity that comes along. There's not much difference in recruiting. You're eager, you're desperate, you're willing, and you're going to find, just like in a divorce, it's just harder to get out, and it's just not worth it.
yeah. You touched on some great points there, especially about the one of not settling for a job where you're going to be possibly doing a role of 2 people, right? Because I see a lot of times, especially in the security standpoint of, you have an architect and an engineer. They combine the job titles into one, and there's already a red flag to me. I really would suggest people applying for those type of roles, right? Because an architect is his own role in itself, and they're trying to put two roles in one. Then you got an extra step. Are they going to pay you the salary of two people? Probably not, but you're going to be overworked with the job duties of two people, and also on top of being underpaid, also in this crazy job market. So that's that standpoint of that. So just got to be able to scope out the job titles and the responsibilities, and you will see if you're a person who has some type of experience in that field that you're applying to, whether they're actually to do the role of more than one individual. Then you can already raise your red flags there. But then, like you said, another thing was the ghosting of recruiters. So me and probably hundreds of thousands of other people looking for jobs. If I all went through the recruiter stage of being ghosted, they get the initial recruiting call. They probably make it all the way up to two, three, 4 or 5 interviews, and then nothing ever again for the next 3 months until they get an automatic rejection saying they picked better candidates. And it's like people just want some type of transparency. And I've heard some speculations as to why recruiters don't give feedback or what you did wrong, but it's a big problem when people just want some type of communication. So can you go into a reason as to why they choose to just up and forget people rather than just saying, "Hey, you didn't make this one, but we can work on another one instead." So,
There, there is a general principle in science. You may or may not have heard about this, but it's called Occam's razor. The simplest answer tends to be the right one. So understand in what I've said about recruiters how they get compensated. They earn their placement fee by placing candidates. Now, if you're a recruiter, you've probably gotten 500, 1,000, 5,000 resumes for a particular placement. Now you've narrowed that down to one person, you've placed them. That's where you've earned your money. You don't earn money in the 4,999 other people. I know from a common sense standpoint and from a morality standpoint, from a long-term thinking standpoint, it makes sense to give people some general feedback, not the usual, we were impressed by your resume, but we found someone else.
yeah,
But when it comes down to it, simply don't get paid. They don't get paid to, tell you why you didn't do well. They don't get paid to tell you what you could do better. More importantly, one of the biggest reasons why recruiters don't pick candidates, and I've mentioned this on LinkedIn many times, and some people take offense to it, but it is very much true, is that they simply didn't like the individual. They could have
yeah,
great experience, they could have a glowing resume, they could have an impressive background, they just didn't like the individual. It comes down to as simple as that. And unfortunately, telling a candidate that on an email is not a very good legal decision. You know,
hmm
it comes down to, these people have their pick of hundreds or thousands of people, and if it comes down to as simple as they didn't like you because you reminded them of their crazy aunt or uncle, that's the reason, and they're not going to give you an explanation for that.
okay, yeah. I've definitely seen that post, and I shared it with my network, and people are just appalled as to that being a thing these days. But I'm going to cover on another episode when I get my person who's in HR about the hiring practices. I'm going to touch on that, but people can make it past the recruiter, then they get to the hiring manager, and then you have their biases. So you got to go through two gatekeepers. You got to go through the recruiter, and then okay, you get past them. Now you got to go through the HR person who already knows who they're wanting to hire, but they got to go through the motions of giving everybody a fresh shot. But I'll go through that on another episode. But I want to cover the numbers thing, right? So first of all, there's two is the numbers are skewed as far as unemployment, right? They say it's the lowest percentage and all these things in the years of unemployment numbers, but you see hundreds of thousands of people getting laid off, and they say there's so many job openings. And like you said earlier, but some of these are just fake and they're ghost jobs. But what is the purpose of these fake and ghost jobs? Well, why? Why are we trying to skew the numbers of who's unemployed? Does that does that do any benefit for the other side of things?
Um, it's interesting because it's only been in the last month. In my experience in business and technology, the media, unless it's a war in Ukraine, is typically anywhere between 3 and 12 months behind reality, meaning that once things hit the market, they're not going to see it in the news for several months to a year. And so, about last month, the Wall Street Journal and a couple of other publications started rolling out this concept of ghost jobs and fake jobs. And it's been an idea that's been around forever and a day, but it's only starting to become prevalent. And they actually touched on the reasons why. And if you're in recruitment, you know these things as second nature. But if you're not, it was quite baffling to a lot of people, and they almost can't believe it because you've got companies saying one thing, you've got the government saying one thing, but you've got people experiencing another. I see it on various social media platforms. Thousands of people come on every day. I've been applying for 12 months. I've submitted 1,000 applications. I'm not getting jobs. But all I ever hear is how many jobs there are in the marketplace. And so, in answer to your question as to why, there's a lot of reasons, actually. I think it was the Wall Street Journal, they've actually broke it down into 6 categories. Number one is that they want to appear as if they're growing. You see this a lot now with companies like Meta. You know, they're only starting to accept, and even Amazon did the same thing. Now, Amazon attributed to a technical error, which I'm not buying that, and
Yeah.
so they said there was a technical error, and they were posting out jobs that were overinflated, and they had no intentions of hiring, and it was purely technology. I mean, somebody implemented that, and that's what a lot of companies were doing and have been doing quite extensively. So why would they want to look like they're growing? Well, if you're a small company, medium-sized company, a large company, by looking like you're growing, you have opportunities for investment, share prices. And that's actually a serious legal issue they're only starting to navigate, is that, well, if you're posting these ghost jobs for the perception that you're growing so the stock market can see that's another benchmark for your stock price, is that even legal? And they're only starting.
Yeah.
It's
That's
actually,
like fraud. Okay.
it's
We
actually
understand.
effective. So another reason why they're doing that, and this is where it gets almost sadistic, is to placate employees. If you're a medium or large size company, chances are a percentage of your staff is looking at your company's job openings. Hey, what are you paying other people? What job openings do you have? Do you have my job openings? Are we going to get new people here? Are you actually going to hire those people you said you were going to put on my team? You know, they keep track of those things. But where it gets sadistic is a lot of times they'll put these job openings to actually placate employees within different departments. So almost to give that impression of you're replaceable. So you can imagine, let's say you're in the technology department. You work in cybersecurity. You work in a particular segment of cybersecurity. And all of a sudden you go on a job website and see 2,000 people have applied for your department for your job. You're probably going to think twice about asking for time off. You're probably going to think twice about asking for a raise. And that happens more often than not. It was a huge factor when they were analyzing this stuff. Why did companies do that? It's because they don't want they don't want candidates to leave. They don't want them asking for raises. And if I were in, say, the tech department in cybersecurity, and I see that, hey, they've got a job opening that's actually my job, and they've got 500 people that are willing to work for 20% less, I'm probably going to do something to make sure either I'm looking for a better job, which is probably not going to happen, or I'm actually working harder. Or what's actually happening now, a month ago, a big topic I was talking about was this ghost jobs, why they're happening. But a big topic that's only starting to surface is cutbacks. People are starting to see reductions in salary. That's becoming the new topic in the workplace, is that people are taking massive pay cuts versus layoffs. Because companies are seeing the effects of what happens when they lay off, is that they're getting massive pushback from, say, social media and different marketplaces. So now they're looking at alternatives, and they're taking pay cuts across the board. So massive companies that say, we don't want the PR nightmare of layoffs, we're just going to cut everybody's salary by 10 or 20%, realizing that, hey, we've got 2,000 candidates for every job that we have available, so we don't really have to worry about that. We've got everybody on replacement. Nobody in this marketplace is not replaceable. So another reason is simply that they're looking for that unicorn candidate. I hear that phrase all the time, and it's just almost frustrating because they're hoping, and it does happen, maybe one out of every 10,000 people, but if you're getting 2,000 applicants for every job post, you may see that unicorn candidate. So they're collecting these repositories of resumes from people. So if they want to find that unicorn candidate, or they need that position because somebody's quit, somebody's resigned, something's happened, there's a death in the company. I mean, there's any number of reasons to maintain that database, but there's just all sorts of reasons why. I know the logic, but the numbers are pretty frightening. I consult with different recruitment agencies, and actually this was one of the numbers I put out there. Again, I'm a numbers guy. So one of the recruitment agencies that I consult for, they are a major recruiting agency in the United States. They have about 1,000 recruiters throughout the country. They place 400,000 job postings a month. That seems like a lot of jobs. But in reality, that 400,000 only relates to about 40,000 placements. And again, that seems like a lot. But in reality to that, they're only looking to fill 4,000 of those. Again, still big numbers. This is a big firm. But when you break it down, only 400 people are hired every single month as a result of those job placements. So I actually posted this. I mean, you can see it in my feed, and I break out the numbers. So people are looking at these 400,000 postings every month that the company places and thinking, oh my God, there's so many job openings. But if you break it down, those 400,000 job postings are only going to net 400 jobs. What does that mean for the 500 or 1,000 people that have applied for every one of those postings? That means your chances are so minuscule that why bother? And that's what I tell people. And this is one recruitment agency out of the thousands out there. Can you imagine how many of those jobs just simply aren't worth applying for? I mean, the numbers get scary if you think about it, and it's unfortunate because the government relies heavily. Whenever the government releases a lot of these job reports, which the media relies on, which other people rely on, they're usually very good at telling you, what they call the sampling base, who they pulled that data from. So the job reports that you often reference in the marketplace relies on a sampling of about 21,000 employers out there. That represents really the entire country in terms of job openings, unemployment, different rates. If you think about it, if these 21,000 firms on average are posting 500, 1,000 postings for a single job, suddenly the numbers start to look scary. I think last month's report suggested that there were almost 12 million jobs available. But if you think about it, could that 12 million actually be 500,000 jobs? I mean, the numbers get pretty scary pretty quickly. And it's worse that so much of our economy depends on the unemployment rate, the job openings rate, the turnover rate. And a lot of these numbers aren't even real. And it's only now that people are starting to realize that, and it's pretty scary. It reminds me heavily of 2008 when, the government was putting out all these numbers and banks were putting out all these numbers. And it took only a few people to start to ask, do these numbers even make sense? And so I think 2023, 2024, the job market is going to be akin to the real estate market in 2008, where we're going to see that all these numbers are going to be blown out of the water. A year from now, and you can mark my words on that, a year from now you're going to start to see these reports how a lot of these numbers just weren't even real. And if you want the best indicator of that, think about this for a minute. This month the job numbers went down, but up until last month, all you ever heard was more jobs, more jobs, more jobs. Well, what company's at the center of that? Indeed. Who in the job market hasn't heard of Indeed? You know who placed record number of layoffs recently? It was Indeed. Does that make sense to anybody? Even worse yet, I think it was about a week ago, LinkedIn had to remodel their pricing structure for job placements because they were losing money. Now, in what world does that make any sense? If you're making money on jobs being available, and that's your entire business model, and the job rates are going up and up and up every month, how does it make any sense that you're now laying 20% of your staff off, having to charge employers 2 and 3 times more just to keep the lights on? You're starting to see all these things that people are starting to ask, wait a minute, That does not make any sense. How is Indeed, one of the largest job application websites in this country, laying off people and starting to lose money? How is LinkedIn, probably one of the largest social networks for job seekers, losing money to the point now they have to charge employers two, three, and four times more money?
Yeah,
What's missing from that picture?
yeah. So that's those are all interesting. So that with people who are watching, um, this is great information because it saves a lot of time and money. First off, if you know what's going on, you know that there's not as many jobs as being promised on these different outlets like LinkedIn, Indeed, and wherever else you want to go to. If you know that those numbers are skewed a lot and their percentages are very low for you to get placed, you may think twice about spending that money, that's spending that $10,000 on that boot camp that's going to promise you job placement. Because how are they going to place you with jobs that don't exist? They're just fishing for people to come and spend their last hard earned money on their programs. So this is for the people who are trying to make that jump into IT. Just you have to take all of these things into consideration when you're trying to make a move, and that's not to scare people from even looking for a job. Because this is why I tell, also, once you get your role, don't get complacent, don't get stuck in your ways of I'm good, I got me a good company. Because at the end of the day, they're exactly what you just said. They're a company, they're about their business. So you need to keep upskilling yourself. Keep adding on skills that make you valuable, at least to yourself and also to other employers. If you only have one set of skills that's only beneficial to one employer that you're currently under, it's going to make the job search that much harder for you when you're trying to move laterally or you get a layoff. Because if you only have this one set of skills, you're already against the numbers that Alex just gave out. You're already against the fake job postings. You're already against the biases from the recruiters who may or may not like you for your name, your race, your tone. You're against the numbers of what's actually available on the market. You're against the numbers of time. You're against the numbers of the salary that's actually being offered, and you're against other people in the market who are constantly upskilling. So you have to just keep those things in mind when you finally accept the role. So this is why I always tell people, don't stop looking at the job boards, don't stop looking at the job market. Actually still network with people, because you never know when the company is going to turn around and say, today your job will be eliminated. And if you're prepared and not waiting around, then it may not take you 6 to 8 months to find your next role, because you've already been in the market, you've already been talking to people, you've already been talking to uh, informal people like Alex here, who will give you the real and what to prepare and have to prepare yourself to make a transition. And maybe you'll get your next role within a few weeks instead of 6 months. So, but we're going at the end of our time here. So the next episode, we're just going to cover that about hiring practices with the hiring managers, and I have a couple of people in HR that I will speak with about that. But Alex shares a lot of good numbers and things on his LinkedIn, which will be in the description below. You can feel free to follow him. He has a lot of great information he posts on his LinkedIn. I think he's going to get tired of my notifications of liking everything that he posts, because it's all good news and information. So I do challenge any recruiters who have any type of issues with what Alex said. Please let me know in the DMs or let me know in the comments about issues that you may see or issues that you have about the recruiter market, or things that you just disagree with, and we can talk about it if you don't agree with it, or if you think it's all conspiracy, which Alex has already backed it up with articles and numbers. But yeah, so thank you for joining me today, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
All right, people, until next time, next episode.